Reducing dynamic range to make better music. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's No Shoes, and today we're going to be diving into compression, what it is, and how to use it, and the parameters that control it. Alright, so what is compression, and how do compressors work? At the baseline, what they do is they reduce the dynamic range of your audio by essentially taking the loudest sounds and making them closer to the softest sounds. And the first parameter that's going to be important in that effort is your threshold. Your threshold is going to determine what level a sound has to pass before the compressor will actually turn on. Once you have your threshold set and your compressor is actually responding to your audio levels, now we're going to start looking into the next parameters. The next one being makeup gain. So, by reducing that gain, your audio overall is going to become more quiet. Now, we need to make it louder again, so that way it will maintain the same presence in the mix it had before, but now, with the loud parts and the quieter parts, just a little bit closer together. After you get past makeup gain, now we're going to get to attack, which refers to the amount of time it takes for the compressor to reach its full level of compression when audio surpasses the threshold. Generally, this is measured in milliseconds. Following that, we're going to go on to release, which is how long it takes the compressor to deactivate and turn off once the audio has dropped back below the threshold level. Next after that is ratio, which essentially determines the aggressiveness of the compression to a certain degree. And what I mean by that is if your ratio is 1:1, then essentially no compression is applied. If your ratio is 2:1, that means your audio source needs to surpass the level of threshold by 2 dB to increase in 1 dB on the output. Same thing goes for 4:1. It needs to increase by 4 dB to increase by 1 dB in the output, and so on and so forth. And then as you get to higher ratios, you start getting more into limiting rather than compression, especially once you start to hit around 9 or 10:1 generally. Then, after that, the last parameter is going to be knee, which essentially again determines some of the severity of the compression. The knee is the curve. Sometimes you will see linear knees, and sometimes you'll see a much more curved knee with a slope rather than just a hard angle. Now, what makes compression truly powerful is that it's actually able to reshape the envelope of the audio that you're pushing through it. So whether it's a snare drum, a bass line, a guitar, a vocal, the attack and release times, especially the attack, are going to allow you to determine how much of the transient comes through. The transient being the highest peak of the audio. So depending on your time, you will actually be able to allow pieces of the transient through before the compressor actually fully activates, allowing you to achieve a more punchy or snappy sound. Another important thing to note before we actually dive into a session and start looking at some compressors is that not all compressors will have these parameters on the surface. Specifically today, I'll be using one of my favorite compressors, Ableton's Glue compressor, which does not actually have a knee control. The knee control is built into the ratio. So, a higher ratio on a compressor without a knee will end up equaling a more aggressive knee, whereas a lower ratio will end up equaling a softer knee. Here we are back in Ableton Live 12, and I put together a little beat yesterday, just a nice simple loop, so that way we can experiment with some compression and see how it feels. I already went through, I EQ'd all of the sounds that we're using, And I actually did some preliminary compression yesterday, so that way I can show you what I found to work best. And for a quick break from our sponsor, thank you to the Buy Me a Coffee patrons. Your donations are extremely helpful. I truly appreciate it. They make my life a little bit easier. They help support these videos. They help me to make better content for y'all. And truly, I appreciate all you guys that support over there. If any of you are interested, check out the link tree in the description. You can get access to a Discord server with a bunch of great people, behind the scenes content, updates on projects I'm working on before anybody else gets to hear about it, and just a bunch of fun stuff. So if you like the videos, like the channel, and you want to see more of my music, check out the link tree in the description. Let's listen to the beat. No compressors active, just EQ'd, so you can get an idea of what it sounds like, and then hear the difference when we enable that compression. Yeah, so as you can hear, we got some drums, we got a little bit of a bass, we got a little bit of like an arpeggiated synth, and then we have that little bell coming in at the end, right? So if we come into the drums and we start playing around with this, we can start to see the effect of compression. So right now I'm on the kick that we're using for this track. I have my compressor set to attack at 30 milliseconds. That's a fairly slow attack. About 10 tends to be fast, or a little bit faster. I have the release set to about 400 milliseconds, and then I have my ratio set as 4:1, with my threshold at minus 21 dB, and my makeup gain at about 2.5 dB. So now the compressor's active. And this is just the kick. And even for sake of example, let's solo that kick. Compressor off. Back on. Just a little punchier. Just a little bit bigger. We're letting that transient through, and then we're closing in on the tail. Now let's bring it back. So now, let's activate a couple of the other compressors here. We're gonna come over to the snare. This snare is being used kind of as like an accent. Right there. Dum, dum, dum. And that's where that snare's coming in. Again, I have a 30 millisecond attack time, but this time only a 200 millisecond release time. Ratio is still at 4:1, threshold is at minus 24, and we have our makeup gain at about 2.5 dB. Something to mention here is that you want your makeup gain at about 50 to 60% of the total level of compression you're applying. So at the height, I'm applying about 5 dB of compression to this snare, which is why I'm choosing to put 2.5 dB of makeup gain onto it. Now if we come a little bit further here, we find our hi-hat. Again, 30 milliseconds of attack. This time only 100 milliseconds of release, and we have our ratio of 4:1. I accidentally left that at 10:1 yesterday. I got carried away. Again, our threshold is at minus 34 this time, and our makeup is still 2.5 dB. I don't know why, I was feeling it. I really liked the feeling of using about 5 dB of compression on these drums. I didn't want them to be like pushed through the floor, like hit to the ceiling. So 5 was a nice, like fairly gentle number, but just enough to get an effect. And if you're having trouble hearing compression, what you can actually do is leave it on a very high ratio, like 10:1 at first, so that way you can hear the compressor working, and then come back later and lower that ratio once you have the sound and shape that you're looking for. Now we're enabling the compressor on the main snare that's hitting on the 2s and the 4s of this beat. And just to separate it for a solid moment here, now we got our drums fully compressed, doing their thing. We went through the chain. Something great in Ableton is you can go through and EQ, compress each drum in the drum machine separately. It's a lot of fun. It gets a little nitty gritty, but you can make it work, and it really does help clean everything up. So, let's just listen to this for a short second, and then we'll add everything back in. Alright, and now we're gonna just do the drums and bass together. Just EQ'd at this moment. There is a little bit of randomization to this bass. It's not always as loud or as powerful with the signal. Compressor's on now. And you can feel that tail that was quiet before, now it's a little bit louder, a little bit more present. Honestly, it sounds kind of funny with just the drums, but once we add in the rest of the instruments, it'll start to work a little bit better. On the bass line, once again, I was really feeling it on letting the transients through. I'm back at 30 milliseconds of attack. I'm on 0.1, 100 milliseconds of release, a 4:1 ratio, a threshold at -23, and about 3 dB of makeup gain. I went a little bit hotter on this one because on some of the peaks it does come just like a little bit past 5, so I want it to be a little bit more present. Also, if you're using Ableton, you're using the glue compressor, it's good to mention that there are 2 more controls. You have your range, which is set to 70 dB, which means the compressor is fully working. It is able to compress as much as it wants. Then we have dry and wet underneath, which determines the ratio between the dry and the wet signal, the unaffected and affected signal. So, I leave the dry wet at 100%. I can't say I can think of a real use case for not compressing the whole sound, unless you already have a very clean sound that's already close to what you want it to be. But I would recommend leaving your wet to dry ratio at 100%. Keep it all wet. You want that noise compressed. There's a reason why you put it on the chain. But let's bring in our melody piece, that arpeggiated synth. And I keep hitting the wrong buttons today, y'all. Again, compressor is off on the melody. One more time with it off. Now it's on. Let's see. So, what's happening here is we have 1 millisecond of attack. So it's very fast. It barely lets anything through. It's almost instantaneous, but not. So instead of creating more punch or creating more snap, it's really just kind of helping to glue that melody together to bring those peaks lower down and help it sit more consistently in the mix without changing the overall character of the sound too much. Then we also need to pull back the ratio here to about 4:1, And then I have the release set to, again, 100 milliseconds. Coming off quick, wanted to leave some space. We got those nice beeps coming in at the top that peak the compressor, and then it drops below that in between. So I wanted it to move kind of quickly to kind of reinforce the groove of the track. Now, if we turn on our last element, our counter melody, one might call it. No way two's about it. Say it backwards. But let's hear it. Boom. Compressor's off on the counter. One more round before we turn it on. Compressor on. All right. And so with this compressor, I left it at 10 milliseconds of attack to allow a little bit of that transient of this like synth bell to come through. I have it set at 200 milliseconds for the delay, or for the release, my apologies. We have a ratio of 4:1, a threshold of -23, a makeup of about 3.5 dB. I think that's the most amount of makeup gain I've done on this track. This bell definitely wanted a little bit more compression than the rest of the audio to help it sit in the mix. And then once again, like I said, range is all the way at 70 dB. The compressor is fully active. Dry and wet, 100%. The compressor, the whole sound is being affected by the compressor. There is no piece of it that is not going through the compressor. And that is kind of the process of getting the compression set up on a track, is figuring out what you want to maximize with the sound. Is it punch? Is it snap? Do you want it to just slide into the mix and be a cohesive element that doesn't really get punchy or snappy, but maintains its original character while staying a little bit more prominent than it was before? And as far as like use cases and everything goes, compression is just a standard part of the process. You know, if you don't need it, you don't need it, but I would be hard pressed to say that there isn't audio out there that doesn't need some type of compression, even a very slight, gentle amount. So keep that in mind when you're mixing. I like to put my compressors after my EQs because that's just the way my brain works. The way I've heard it said is that because you use the EQ to amplify the parts you like and take out the parts you don't like, it allows you to get a more accurate level of compression because you're not pushing all of the sound through it, but just the pieces that you want. So that covers the basics of how you can use compression to reduce dynamic range and reshape the sounds that you're using in your mix. It's a very powerful tool. It works amazingly when done correctly, and it definitely takes some tweaking, and it's something I honestly am still trying to understand. There's a lot of other aspects to compression, like side chaining. You can do some type of side chaining with EQing that's internal. You can do external side chaining. A lot of people use that to make bass lines duck kicks and stuff like that. If that's something you guys are interested in seeing me talk about, please let me know. And I also went through a lot of great resources researching this video just to really solidify my understanding. And a video that I came across in that process was made by Will Borza. It's up on YouTube. It's called like The Secret to Compression or something like that. All these sources will be cited, but shout out to Will Borza. You should definitely check him out and wait till the end of the video to see his talk about SSL theory, which essentially just refers to making your music sound familiar by using familiar settings from a compressor that has been used commonly on probably every big track you've ever heard. Thank you guys for watching and hanging out with me today, listening to my beat and checking out the compression. Much love to the No Shoes gang and everybody that supports over there. I truly appreciate y'all. If you guys are enjoying these videos, please let me know in the comments down below. Please let me know any questions you might have, whether technical, creative, or whatever it might be. And I will see you all next time.